This is Brian at ScreenFiles.com in review. And what I'm looking at today is 2023's Lumberjack the Monster, directed by Takashi Miike. Lumberjack the Monster revolves around a serial killer who steals the brains of the people he murders. And ruthless lawyer Akira Nomiya is next on his list. Miike Takashi is a renowned Japanese director who has done over 100 movies, television shows, and videos, though he's best known for Audition and Ichi the Killer. Lumberjack the Monster is a fairly odd movie in that it has a runtime of 1 hour and 59 minutes, essentially 2 hours. But at the same time, it also doesn't have enough time to tell its story as well as it should. And I think that this movie would have worked much better as a 3 or 4 episode series on a streaming channel because it would have given the story space to breathe. There's an idea that underpins Lumberjack Killer, which is very science fiction adjacent, and that's not a problem in and of itself if it revolves around a technology that currently exists. The problem is that the technology that is used is, for the most part, theoretical and does not exist in the current day. And the point being, the movie does not expand upon it enough to give it space to have the viewer understand what this technology entails and what it's about and why it's even there in the first place. Miike Takashi just introduces it, and without that background, I was kind of left wanting, to be totally honest. I wanted there to be more information about it, and I know, as I said, Lumberjack the Monster is too long at 1 hour and 59 minutes. Though, as I also said, if it were broken up into a 3 or 4 episode series, I think it could have better addressed these issues and would have been the better for it. And as far as these chips that are implanted in people's brains, the antagonists in the story, Lumberjack the Monster has quite a few antagonists, it's worth mentioning. They managed to do it in a home with a makeshift operating theater. This makes it feel somewhat easy to do, so to speak. They're not only doing surgery on people's brains, but they're implanting chips in people's brains, in their home. This is not a great thing. And once again, I'm trying not to be repetitive here. If the movie had invested more time in getting viewers to understand the process behind implanting these chips in people's brains, I think the movie would have worked significantly better. It works well, which I will expand upon in a moment, though it could significantly work better. And the thing is, the implanting chips in people's heads is an important part of the overall story. And in fact, I would argue it's crucial to the overall story, which is why you want to invest in it. The story needed to breathe a little bit more. Lumberjack the Monster opens on the police invading this decrepit house. After a search, they come upon this woman who has been operating on this little boy. We know that she's been doing that because he has bandages on his head, and she threatens to kill him if any of the police approach. The movie tells us that this has been happening quite a bit. In other words, numerous children have been kidnapped by this couple, and the wife is experimenting on them and inserting chips into their brains. We don't quite know the purpose for it yet, but it is something of a serial nature, and it's happening to quite a few young children before the police intervene. And the child who is on the bed with the bandage on his head is reading a book called Lumberjack the Monster, which the movie revolves around. Lumberjack the Monster is a story revolving around a lumberjack that is cruel and evil. He is physically a monster as well, and he goes around killing people. This story permeates the entire movie and is crucial to understanding the motives of the serial killer. And Takashi Miike does well in incorporating this story into the overall movie. Though from that point, the movie moves on to someone driving a white BMW. And they're doing so pretty quickly, though eventually they're pursued by someone else driving a Subaru. This scene sticks in my mind, if only because the Subaru was not one of the sportier models. So it should not have been able to keep up with this BMW. Though at some point the BMW just goes far ahead and vanishes. Though when the driver of the Subaru makes a turn, the BMW is parked a few yards away and the driver is standing in the middle of the road. This is our first meeting with Akira Nomoyina, and he is the protagonist and antagonist of the story. I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of protagonists in this story, and it's true. So it's hard to like anyone. You don't necessarily root for anyone. The policewoman who is chasing after the serial killer is perhaps the only antagonist in this story. Virtually everyone else is just varying degrees of evil, which is interesting. And I think lesser directors would not do well with this material, though Miike Takashi does particularly well with it. And we eventually learn that the serial killer, who once again kills people and takes their brains, is targeting Akira. Now, this shows that there's a connection between what that woman was doing with children, kidnapping them and planting chips in their brains, and Akira, though the movie doesn't tell us what that connection is. Though, we learn that Akira is a psychopath, and we learn this because the car that was chasing Akira crashed, and the driver was unable to escape. And instead of helping the driver out, Akira questioned him a little bit and slit his throat. Now, Takashi Miike has an almost operatic sense of violence, which is to say, when combined with music, it's almost beautiful. It's not, but there's a certain rhythm to it. It's not quite as, it doesn't feel quite as random as violence that you typically see in horror movies. And so, when he kills this person, the blood is insane. Which is to say, it's not just a little trickle like in most movies when you stab someone in the throat. This is like water fountain levels of blood. It is bonkers. I don't know if that's even real or not, but I imagine if you had cut a person in an artery, you would get a very consistent and heavy flow of blood. Though to see it on screen is very unusual, and it's certainly not something you typically see in American films. Lumberjack the Monster. Lumberjack the Monster is a very interesting movie, and the way it is filled with a lot of bad people is something that I think a lot of directors would not handle as adroitly as Miike Takashi. Though the thing of it is, it's also not a movie I think everyone can get into. I watched this over a period of 3 nights because, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's too long. It doesn't need to be as long as it is. And it never lost impact despite watching it in that fashion, which I am relatively certain is not the way the movie was made to be watched. But it worked for me. It is a movie that, if you've seen other work of Miike Takashi, it is certainly worth catching if you're a completist. If you're not, it's probably going to be something that you might not really get into, though it's certainly worth a try. Lumberjack the Monster is a Japanese film, which I mentioned because Miike Takashi is a Japanese director, though it is not dubbed. Or if it is, I didn't look, because dubbing is not good. I have not seen any good dubbing, literally. So watch it with subtitles on if you're going to, and it's really interesting, and I think you might enjoy it. This is Brian at ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.